Um, Welcome to the session. Today, we're going to talk about how to simplify and standardize developer environments for the cloud. Before we begin, let's introduce ourselves. My name is Elson Yuen from Red Hat. I'm the architect for DevFile services that drives the development of DevFile, including the specification, library, and the registry.
And I'm Serhii Leshchenko. I'm again from Red Hat, and I'm team lead for the team which has one of the direction, the Workspace operator. It's the direction we will talk about a bit later.
Okay, so let's get started. Over the years, cloud native development has become more and more popular. However, it does bring some challenges to developers. According to a CNCF survey on 2020, complexity joins the cultural changes to become the top challenges as developers using the deploying and containers, with 41% of the respondents voting on it. So that's a fairly significant number. So why is it complex? Breaking down typical monolithic applications to smaller microservices introduce configuration overhead to declare dependencies, and more configuration is involved. It is also harder to troubleshoot due to inconsistent setup and infrastructure differences between different environments, CI and production. Also, productivity can be lower due to bigger feedback loop from local environment to the final testing environment. So what do we do? We have a mission to accelerate to cloud native developer workflow and enforces consistent standards. Instead of having developers to deal with these complexity, there are three things that we need to address. Simplicity. Development should be simple, meaning it's easy to code, build, run, debug the application. Every developer has their own favorite tools, so they should be able to do that with the tools of their choice. Consistency. We want to have consistent environment across different phases of development, including development, testing, CI, and production. Minimize one of the most common developer quotes. Well, it works in my environment. Productivity. We also want quick turnaround time so they can see the changes of their code immediately. The last point may be a bit controversial since it means no more excuses for frequent conflict breaks for developers. So let's see an example of a typical development workflow for, using Java with Maven. I just take that as an example. It involves doing Maven compile, doing a Docker build with mounting a local file system, setting up debug, and the list goes on. And these steps will be different if you're using different language or framework. These are not rocket science, but someone has already figured it out before. So with that scenario, take a look at an example tool with that file support, like for example, ODO, which is a CLI tool that helps developers to deploy the applications on Kubernetes. That files will allow you to do all those with using a single command, ODO push. And the beauty of this is that you can use the exact same command to build different type of applications, like Node, Python applications, not just applicable for Java Maven scenarios. That is simplicity. So how can that file help? It provides a single source of truth for a development environment and deployed environment. So that's consistency. It provides ready-to-go stack that files don't force a new workflow or tools. They provide instructions for automating what an expert, like the runtime or stack providers, would do manually. It's also tools agnostic and vendor neutral. So as long as your tools understand the dev file, you will be able to produce the same build results. That file also allows you to customize the workflow or extend it by referring to a parent dev file to fit your development practices. And you can define the development environment as code, which means that you can package the dev file as part of your application to prevent configuration drift, making the environment reproducible, shareable, and versioned as part of the code. So who can benefit from dev files? First, stack providers can write stack once and it will work across different tools. No need to build and maintain custom development tools. They can also manage different versions of the stack via the registry support. For stacks, I mean the dev files that are able to handle applications of the same type or framework. For example, Java Maven that I used before. For tools provider, there's no need to build custom runtime support. So let the expert do their job. Runtime teams know the best to build and run their applications on their servers. Tools will get the runtime support for free whenever a new stack gets added to the registry, which I will explain a little bit later. Developers don't have to worry about the complexity of setting up the environment and focusing on developing the logic of the applications. So spending more time on coding, which is what we all love to do. Developers will have flexibility of using different development tools, but still able to produce the consistent output described in the dev file. Advanced developers can also customize the build when needed. So in a typical setup, architects would define the standard way of work, how to do inner loop, outer loop, providing starter projects for developers, and then any policy settings that's needed. Dev team will use the development environment defined by the architect to develop the application. In this way, the developer can easily set up an environment in the exact same way as any other developers in the organization. And it will minimize the environmental discrepancies between different stages of development. And that ensures consistency. Let's take a look at what is included in a dev file. A dev file can include inner loop, outer loop development information. Dev file 2.0 is currently focusing on inner loop. We're working on dev file 2.2, which is focusing on outer loop support. In the future, we also plan to add information like product monitoring as part of the dev file as well. Take inner loop as an example. It contains a list of projects where you can actually find the projects from. It defines some build components, for example, container definition that provides the runtime support. It can provide commands that the tools can call to build, run, and debug. For specific applications, it may also contain service binding information to link services to an application. In the outer loop scenarios, it may contain like deployment options or different strategy for building the production container images. Once you have a dev file included as part of the application, the tools will be able to recognize it and know how to build and deploy the application. If you don't have a dev file already as part of the application and want to reuse what's available out there, that's where the dev file registry can help. So let's talk about the dev file registry. A dev file registry is a centralized place to store dev files that tools developers can easily access to. It's an OCI-based registry with REST API for accessing the content of the registry. For example, finding a list of dev files available, metadata associated with each dev file, and downloading content of the stacks. A Go library is also available for tools written in Go to interact with the registry programmatically. There are different types of registry for which I will talk about next. Here's how we link the dev files, dev file registry, and tools together. A public community registry at the bottom left stores the dev files provided and maintained by the community. Any developer can feel freely use the community dev files. We have the official one, registry.devfile.io. We currently are working on getting better web view on browsing the dev files in the registry. We're also working with the community to get more dev files in place as well. Any vendors can provide their own product registry in case they want to customize the vendor-specific dev files. These are typical ones with specific product support or require login to access resources related to the stacks. User can also install a custom registry in their cluster to host their own set of dev files. It can also be used by a company to store a list of dev files that can be used by the developers within the organizations. Regardless of which registry the dev file comes from, the tools can be configured to see those, use them with the tools in the same way. In terms of tools, we are working with the community and a major car vendor to join the project. So I've talked about what the dev files are, who would use it, benefit from them, and dev file registries. I will pass on to Serhii to talk about a concrete example on the tool using dev files.
Thank you, Elson. Could you stop sharing so I can take over? Thank you. So now you should be able to see slides. Let me know if you don't.
Yeah, I can see it.
Thank you. Okay, so with a dev file, you define how to work with your application project, how to compile, build, test it, and so on. But that's not enough for development. And the missing part here is how to effectively work with your source code. And it's IDE who is supposed to help. And it's what Eclipse Chair proposes with Dev Workspace. Eclipse Chair has built with dev file a concept called Dev Workspace, which allows to define, configure, and start an IDE for your project. The workspace is defined as Kubernetes custom resource definition, which means it's an extension for the API of your Kubernetes OpenShift cluster. And the workspaces are stored directly on the cluster and processed by a special custom controller. And there is also a Red Hat product called Code-Ready Workspaces, which downstreams Eclipse Chair and basically provides pretty much the same functionality, but is more stable and secure since every release is beta tested, and we guarantee that every container is built in a secure environment. So with Chair and CRW, we have the following flow. Chair consumes your dev file, then Chair adds another set of fragments which define the IDE and its plugins that can be tailored according to your project need. And you are provided with Dev Workspace, where you have an IDE and tools from the dev file, where you are able to modify code and test it instantly. It's easy, it's repeatable and predictable, just like OpenLink. And yeah, it's a demo time. And for the demo, I have a Node.js sample application. It uses Mongo database to store its data. And let's start with taking a look at the dev file I have here. It's dev file version 2. And I have set the current project here. So, and we are proceeding to components. The first component is Node.js container, which I'm going to use to run my Node.js application, which is mounted as sources, and it exposes HTTP server. So I will be able to reach this to test my application. And the next component is Mongo database, which also declares a target port. And this is configured to be used in our Node.js application above. And the last volume, the last component is volume. It's for storing our MongoDB data, since we don't want to lose our test data between the workspace restarts. So we mounted this volume to Mongo database. And then how to work with our application. We have two commands to run our application and to stop it. So, and now let's proceed to Eclipse and how we use, how we can develop it with Eclipse. Everything that we need to get started is just the URL of Git repository. So here we have Eclipse Chair, and we just paste the Git URL, Git repository URL here, hit create and open link, and Dev Workspace is created for us, and now it's starting. We need to wait until it's running. It might be interesting to take a look what is happening on the hood. So let's check OpenShift console. And the first thing that is interesting to take a look is Dev Workspace custom resource. We can see that one Node.js sample is created on the cluster. And if we check its YAML, we will find under spec template our dev file with our commands, with our components and projects. Also, it makes sense to pay attention on the one component that we haven't declared in our project's dev file. It's the IDE. It's fragment that is provided by Eclipse Chat. And if we take a look on the pods in this namespace, we can see that it has 4 containers. 2 of them are ones for our application, MongoDB and Node.js, which we declared with dev file. And other 2 is IDE and its utility. And now let's return back to Eclipse Chat. This time IDE should be ready. Just let's wait a bit until it's loaded. Yeah. So Eclipse Share by default provides Eclipse tier, which is similar to VS Code, and basically it's compatible with VS Code in the sense that it implements VS Code API and it supports installing VS Code plugins, maybe not all, but many. And also, Cha provides a common mechanism to use any IDE that you can open in your browser. So our IDE is opened, our project sources is cloned, and it's time to try our application here. We are able to run task, which actually is from command that we configured in dev file. And we're going to run our Node.js application in Node.js container. And after we get some output here, we will be able to try this application with the endpoint we declared as HTTP server. So let's try it. Yeah, it's not started yet. And if you refresh, we can see our application. Let's test it. So yeah. I add in some employee. Yeah, I'm able to edit it. So far, application works as expected. And we can see that employees removal does not work, and we need to fix it. So we are returning back to our IDE, and let's try to fix that bug. I found the delete action that I have in my application, and here is a typo underscore is missing. So I changed my source code, and now I'm able to test if it fixes the issue or not. So I'm stopping the application and that I ran previously. Now I run it again with the updated source code. Yeah, it's now restarted. We are returning to our application. We are refreshing a page just to wait until it's available. It's not for some reason. No, now it's here, and yeah, let's try again to remove an employee. And we can see that this time it works. So we are sure that our bug fixes the issue, and now we are able to commit the changes, push it to the upstream to our personal fork, create a pull request, and then pull request reviewers will be able to review our changes and test it in the same way as we did it, just with opening a link, since we are able to construct the workspace URL just by appending Eclipse check cluster plus our repository, where we even are able to specify the branch. Yeah, this URL will lead to the same the workspace where reviewers will be able to review our changes and test it. And that's all about demo. So we're turning to the slides.
Yeah, so in this session, we have talked about how DevFile works and how it can help you to develop your cloud native application. I hope we have provided enough information that can help you to simplify and standardize the development environment for cloud. We are an open source project, so any contributions such as bug reporting, feature requests, the usual like PR requests, and even contributing to the stacks to our community registry are always welcome. For more information, you can check out our main website, our DevFile registry. We are also working with the community and talking to another major cloud vendors and trying to get their tools to join the project. For the issue checking, you can use our GitHub repo. For chat system, we've got a Gitter from it. Like the tools that we show are shade, and we are not limited to a particular tools. We're actually targeting for dev files is basically any tools that you have, CLI, web tools, or any other tools that we have. So yeah, we are looking for contributions from tools contributors, any of the stack providers, or any developers who is interested in the technology and using dev files. Yep. I think that's it for what we want to talk about today. Thank you. And yeah, we're open for questions.
Yeah, thank you very much for the very interesting presentation. There are indeed already quite a few questions. So the first one is, you mentioned a tool called Odo in the beginning. So there was a link posted in the chat, but could you say a few words about Odo and how it relates to the stack definition?
So Odo itself is actually a generic tools that allows, like we recently turned into a generic tools that allows you to build and deploy, help you to build and deploy your applications and also push it to Kubernetes. So ODO is actually a Kubernetes focused tools. So basically what it allows you to do is allows you to connect to a particular cluster, and then having your applications storing on your local file system, you can continue to modify it, update it, but then you can do an ODO push and then run the applications and build that and run that and deploy it into Kubernetes. Itself is an open source project. ODO.dev is where the main page is coming from. I think someone posted a link in there already. Anyone who's interested in that, I can definitely talk more, and then I can provide more information on that.
Cool, thank you.
And I also see another questioning whether the shade, the dev file is coming from shade or something. So dev file is already originated from shade, Eclipse shade, and then what we call the dev file 1.0. Dev file 1.0 is fairly shade specific, that you cannot reuse it outside of shade. So we will work the dev file. That's what we call the dev file 2.0 to make it really generic. You can use across tools. It's not even web IDE tools only. It can be used across different levels tools. We also starting introducing the stacks and making it more formal, and having the community registry to provide different framework and languages support in there. So consider dev file 2.0 is a not only an extension, but it's actually we work for that, and we still call it dev file.
I mean, that aspect is very interesting. So to my understanding, just to confirm that you kind of split out the effort for the format dev file from the J project. Yeah. So is that some kind of standard that you want to set? And could you highlight the motivation behind this? I mean, obviously it's always great to have several tools use the same format, but maybe you could highlight the benefits and the motivation that is driving you on this.
Yeah, so that's definitely like sharing. I think I kind of going through that. I think to help users to have an environment which is consistent, simple, and also productive as well. Because if you take a look at cloud native environment, it do help a lot, especially in the production side, for which it will you have CI/CD pipeline for it, but there's a gap in the development side. If you think about people can do on local development, but when they are trying to do development on cloud, that's where all the hurdles that I talked about before is coming from. And that file is meant to be standardizing that, and definitely we are trying to bring it to some sort of community for open sourcing it to make it to become a truly community project. Today, we're just using GitHub. We're definitely working on that.
There's a related question, which is, are dev files more often being managed by stack providers or developers? Because on dev file, I always see both listed. And is there a way to be used across both?
Yeah, so you can use it for both. So the way that we see that file to be used is we've got the a community registry or any of the registry, regardless the three types of registry that I talk about. So those are standard boilerplates that can be generically support certain type of applications or framework. And then when the user is using it, they can include a dev file as part of their application. So, and that file can actually refer to a parent within one of those repositories. So what it means is I can actually, let's say, take a Java Maven project, and then I will say, I've got a Java Maven application with a POM in there. I can say, okay, let me throw in a dev file and calling the parent for the Java Maven project on it. And then what it does is actually we use what's actually available on the community, that is the version that's maintained by the stack provider, and it can provide the best practices for developing Java Maven applications. But with the dev file that I stored in my application, the dev file refers to that parent, but I can also override any of the behavior on the parent. So I can actually customize the standard stack, and then providing update on or updating the workflow of the project to fit your particular application. Now, even if you're doing that, there's two ways that you can do it. You can completely clone the that file coming from the community. That means you are completely detached from the original community one, and you are responsible for maintaining that entire that file. But you can also refer to a parent, and you will always in case the one in the registry changes, then you will just pick up the changes immediately from that. So it depends on how tightly you want to control your application environment.
Thank you very much. That there's a feedback in the chat, and so user is saying that the dev.io page would benefit from some more explanation on the standardization process and the stakeholders. Talking about stakeholders, are there any hidden potential adopters that you can share that you have conversation with who want to adopt dev files, especially about tools who can process them?
Yeah, so currently there are a bunch of tools in there, like Eclipse, we show that. Audio, we kind of talk about that. There's also Dev Console is doing a dev preview on the dev file support as well. It's the OpenShift Dev Console. We are also working with another major cloud vendor, which I check with them. I can't disclose any of that name yet. But yeah, we're working with the community, and anyone, any tools provider or any step provider who's actually interested in it, we're definitely welcome to join our project. We're really really want this to strive, and really want this to become a standard for cloud development environment. And think about it, like if you have the dev file on your application, even if you have got a mixed list of developers, some developers may want to use Eclipse, some developers may want to use IntelliJ or VS Code, they can share the same dev file, and it will be able to build and run in the same way, as long as the tools actually understand it. So that's the major uptick for that, like both easy for you to set up, and also you can actually work it across different tools as well. And that's our goal.
I see. And maybe one last question. So do you have any experience from the practical use of dev files? Does it actually, so I mean, technically it should make the evolution of the setup of a project easier, meaning probably updates to the development environments, things like that are technically easier. Would you claim that this in general improves the tool setup, especially in terms of evolution, that you more often apply new versions or generally have a more modern stack because it's simpler?
Yeah, so I think the main part is the stack is that we are seeing will be coming from the runtime, and the runtime is the pieces that are the folks who actually know the best how to build on the application. So as long as they provide the stack and maintain the stack, then everyone will get benefit out of it. Yeah, so yeah, I do see that, and even within Red Hat, we currently have got multiple tools starting to sharing the same dev file format. We internally already see the benefit of it, because we develop once, and then we've got the runtime to work on those stacks. It can share across different tools and it can reuse across different tools. I'm not saying there's no challenges in making everyone work in the same format, but that's definitely like a benefit that we already see within our organization.
So that means the dev files are, in a sense, also a good way for communication between the runtime guys and the developer guys.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, thank you so much for answering for the great talk and answering all the question. I strongly. Oh, there's another question. I'm sorry. Can you add comments in a dev file to teach people some more details? Like, can you add comments in a YAML file?
Yeah, so we can definitely do that. Like I think so. There's if you actually want to know more about that file, we are actually working on the landing pages, which will have which we are planning to have different personas on it. Like for example, developers and stuff like that. That's something that is under the work. For currently, what you have is on devfile.io, there's actually the stack, and there's a stack authors guide. That's the easiest way for you to understand how you can actually write dev files.
Perfect. Now, final words, I strongly encourage all the attendees to join the channel and ask questions there. And Serhii and Elson, if you would be so kind to watch the channel if there are more questions, to answer them. And I want to thank you very much again for the presentation and the interesting discussion. And I would hand it over to the next session.